So how do UBS's results compare to its rivals on Wall Street? JPMorgan's profit rose 67% to a record. First quarter earnings climbed to more than $5.5 billion, beating analyst estimates, but revenue fell 8% from a year earlier to around $26 billion. Next came Goldman Sachs. The bank reported a 21% drop in profit. Net income slid as trading revenue recovered from a weak fourth quarter. And at Morgan Stanley, first quarter net income was $968 million. That was down 45% from a year earlier and included a loss from a joint venture with Mitsubishi UFJ. Let's get some more analysis on those earnings from UBS. Ralph Silva, he's a strategist at Silva Research Network. Hi, Ralph.
Morning.
I mean, as Caroline was saying, it beat on all the main metrics.
Yeah, I think Caroline said it best. They are making money everywhere. The problem is that UBS and Credit Suisse have a slight problem, and that's a regulatory issue.
Yes, and how are they going to overcome that problem? How is it going to affect profits and revenue going forward?
I don't think they can overcome this problem in the short term. They are handicapped because the Swiss government is actually doing everything first. In the long run, it's going to be beneficial for them because they're last now, but they're going to be first when the rest of the G20 countries impose the same type of regulation.
So you're saying that the rest are going to say, you know what, banks, you've got to hold twice as much capital as Basel III tells us?
Absolutely, no question about it. At least in the G20 countries, that is what we're expecting for every G20 country. So UBS and Credit Suisse right now are behind everybody else. But in about a year to 2 years, they're going to be ahead of everyone else. So I call them a long-term hold, not a short-term hold.
So in the near term, shares could fall, but as you say, over 2 years, they're definitely one to hold.
I think they're really punching above their weight. If you think about it, they've hired 1,700 people, yes, but they've lost some of their heavy earners. So they're incredibly talented people have left the organization because the government hasn't allowed them to pay these people what they were worth. So they lost a lot of their earners. So these numbers are absolutely exceptional for the number of people.
But if you've lost some of your biggest revenue generators, how are you going to generate revenue going forward?
Well, the good thing is they're going to come back. They're going to come back because the other banks are going to start having the same kind of price pressures, so eventually they will come back. But they have such great customers in the private wealth area, especially UBS, and Credit Suisse is now growing exceptionally as well. And those customers stay with you.
They've turned it around, haven't they, in the private wealth management side? Have they properly turned a corner after 9 consecutive quarters of net outflows?
I think maybe they have. It's really hard to say on just one quarter. They haven't been losing as many people. That's great. They haven't been gaining as many people as I'd like to see them do. And that's a bit of a concern. So I'd like to see one more quarter of asset generation, and then maybe I can make a better judgment.
What about the investment banking side, Ralph? It's a tricky business right now. Just look at what's happening with its U.S. peers. It needs to trim things back a little bit more?
It has to, and his whole plan of increasing investment banking, increasing trading and all these things, he can only do that if he had the capital to do that, and the capital adequacy in Switzerland basically says he can't. So he's going to have to change his philosophy at least for the next 2 or 3 quarters, which is not going to be a problem for the bank because it's very deep and it has very great diversification. But for the short term, it's going to be a bit of a pressure.
Okay, so far we've had most of the big players. We've got Credit Suisse out tomorrow. How is the bank reporting season going so far? How would you grade it?
I would say the following. I'd say in Europe, we're doing relatively flat. It's okay, but not great. In Asia, we're doing very well, better than expected. And in the U.S., we're actually seeing it worse than expected. So we're seeing profit downturns of about 10 to 12% in the U.S., profit upturns about 5 to 6% in Europe, and in Asia, we're looking at 10 to 12%.
Is that going to be the same sort of picture for the rest of 2011?
I don't think so. I think that Europe's actually going to get a little bit stronger starting in September through the end of the year after people come back from their holidays. I think that the U.S. will have to turn around, and I absolutely believe they will turn around, and it'll be quite aggressive.
What's going to spur that?
I think the fact that after summer comes, we're going to have to see a lot more M&A activity. There's a lot of businesses out there that need to do M&A, and the American banks are very well poised to do that. They just need to get that started.
And who should we be putting our money into right now? As an investment in the short term, you've said UBS, Credit Suisse long term, but in the short term, what are the best bank picks?
Top banks, JPMorgan, Goldman Sachs, HSBC, BNP Paribas, the only ones that are safe right now. In the long term, there's a huge list of banks that you can do for the long term. For the next 2 or 3 quarters, keep it safe, keep it in those types of organizations.
Okay, Ralph, thank you very much indeed.